For the fundamental canons, some of the ones that I thought were important are holding paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public, performing services in areas of competence, issuing public statements only in objective and truthful manners, and avoiding deceptive acts. For the evaluation of these canons, I think the primary word that shows Kant would support this section is duties. And because engineers should follow these canons out of duty, it's reasonable to say that following these canons would be morally correct according to Kant, because again, they're acting out of the sake of duty. One example of an action that Kant would support is a civil engineer being afforded a large amount of money to design a new jet engine, but turning it down because it's not in their area of competence. So this would be supported from the code of ethics standpoint because it's out of their area of competence. Utilitarianism might think that it would be okay to accept this job designing a jet engine if you were a civil engineer because it would make you a lot of money and would promote happiness and would maximize the engineer's well-being. But for Kant, they would say the engineer made the correct ethical decision by fulfilling their duty of upholding the fundamental canons. For rules of practice, just a summary, this article details the guidelines engineers should follow while on the job. Two things that I thought were worth evaluating are Article 2, Section 1, Part B, which says engineers shall approve only those engineering documents that are in conformity with acceptable standards. And then Article 2, Section 4, Part E, which says engineers shall not solicit or accept a contract from a governmental body on which a principal or officer of their organization serves as a member. So that one I think pertains to conflicts of interest. And evaluating these, I think showed me that not all ethical guidelines in the Code of Ethics would be supported by Kant. For Article 2, Section 1, Part B, I think Kant would go even further beyond what the article states and say that engineers disapproving documents that conform to standards are also a morally correct action. Just because things conform to standards doesn't mean they're those universal moral laws that Kant really supports and wants people to follow. And so disapproving the documents that follow standards that aren't universal moral law would be a good act according to Kant. So disapproving things that aren't universally accepted or good. And an example is an engineer not signing off on an approval of a bridge because the bridge isn't built with a high enough factor of safety. So say the standard set a very low factor of safety, like 2 for a bridge. And everybody in their right mind can universally say that they want the bridge to be as safe as it possibly can be. So the engineer sees this standard as incorrect and he disapproves the design because it cannot be willed to be a universal moral law. Article 2, Section 4, Part E, Kantianism would indicate that this standard about conflict of interest is wrong. As long as a contract being accepted helps carry out a categorical imperative, I think Kant would overlook the conflict of interest. And the contract could, so one thing that could be a categorical imperative is the contract would be pertaining to something like providing water to a third world country going through a drought. And this would be a universally supported moral law according to rational thinking. So while the Code of Ethics might disagree with signing a contract that you have a conflict of interest with, Kant in this situation would be willing to overlook the conflict of interest for supporting the universal moral good of helping people get through drought and provide them with clean drinking water.